faithfully delivering value by interpreting great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today we're interpreting the book The Checklist Revolution for you. The author, Atul Gawande, is a world-renowned surgeon, also a White House health policy advisor, and a key figure who influenced Obama's healthcare reform. In Time magazine's list of the 100 most influential people globally, he's the only doctor selected. We at Sally's Book Talk have interpreted his two books, Being Mortal and Better. Atul Gawande wrote The Checklist Revolution based on his own work experience. He found that for healthcare workers, no matter how detailed the specialization or thorough the training, some errors are unavoidable. For example, even in surgeries at the renowned Johns Hopkins Hospital, infections from IV catheters, problems that shouldn't happen, occur frequently. Research shows at least half of fatal cases and severe complications are preventable. But why weren't they avoided? Gawande discovered the answer. Key steps in work are often overlooked. That's why he proposed a checklist management method to reduce these mistakes. So, what is a checklist? Simply put, it's writing down reminders on a piece of paper, like jotting down what to buy before hitting the supermarket to avoid forgetting. Or travel guides you might use often, homework schedules for kids learning at home, and so on. These simple checklists are already quietly helping you big time, and in work, their power is even greater. For instance, Johns Hopkins Hospital created a checklist with just 5 items to cut down IV catheter infections. I'll read them out so you get the idea. 1. Wash hands with disinfectant soap. 2. Disinfect the patient's skin with chlorhexidine solution. 3. Cover the patient's whole body with a sterile surgical drape. 4. Put on a surgical cap, mask, sterile gloves, and wear a surgical gown. 5. After inserting the catheter, place sterile gauze at the insertion point. That's it. This 5-item checklist slash infection rates at Johns Hopkins from 11% to 0 in a year, preventing 43 infections and 8 deaths, saving $2 million. Miracles aren't just in healthcare. In almost all fields like construction, aviation, finance, investment, and public management, checklists help avoid errors and solve problems. No wonder big shots from all fields came out to endorse this book. Malcolm Gladwell, author of the bestseller The Tipping Point, believes checklists are intricately connected to all aspects of the modern world. Their power is both astonishing and thought-provoking. Today, I'll unpack the essence of this book through 3 key questions. First, how do checklists prevent our mistakes? Second, how to create effective checklists? Third, how to ensure checklists are properly implemented? Let's start with the first question. To explain how checklists prevent errors, we first need to categorize mistakes. Gawande divides errors into 2 types: errors of ignorance and errors of ineptitude. Errors of ignorance occur from lacking knowledge or understanding. For instance, when President Washington had a cold and fever, doctors used bloodletting, draining nearly half his blood, causing fatal hypovolemic shock. This happened in 1799. Back then, people didn't know the dangers of blood loss, so bloodletting was common practice. Thanks to scientific progress, such knowledge-based errors have decreased significantly. But the pursuit of knowledge never ends. Ignorance errors are unavoidable and unfortunate. Yet another type of error is entirely preventable. Gawande calls these errors of ineptitude, when you know what to do but still mess up. Why does this happen? Gawande argues that the sheer volume and complexity of our knowledge make it impossible to manage correctly, safely, and consistently. It exceeds human capacity. As the saying goes, knowledge saves us but also overwhelms us. This stems from 2 inherent human limitations. First, human memory and attention are finite resources. You can't keep them online constantly. Research shows the brain can handle only 4 tasks simultaneously. Many find that while quadruple tasking is possible, efficiency drops and mistakes increase. Gawande documented ICU routines. Each patient undergoes 178 nursing procedures daily, every one carrying risks. Medical staff Must stay hypervigilant and focused. One slip could have grave consequences. Despite doctors and nurses not allowing themselves to be negligent, mistakes still happen frequently. On the other hand, while experience is valuable, sometimes it's the veterans who make basic mistakes. The reason is that overconfidence can numb your brain, causing you to miss crucial details. For example, an expert climber was chatting with teammates while tying a lifeline knot during routine low difficulty training. Clearly, he didn't take that familiar action seriously, resulting in a poorly tied knot, and he fell off the mountain. In summary, limited attention span and complacency are the two main triggers for errors of ineptitude. In Gawande's view, checklists precisely avoid these two pitfalls. First, checklists act like external brain extensions that record critical necessary steps. They're often simple yet indispensable, but frequently overlooked. Whether you're inexperienced, overconfident, or having an off day, using checklists prevents skipping critical steps and making errors of ineptitude. Additionally, checklists are mandatory safeguards, simple enough for one page, yet compelling extreme caution. Planning ahead, real-time checks, post-action reviews, and preventive measures. Think about how you plan a road trip itinerary. Planning means considering timing, budgeting, routes, accommodations, and anticipating emergencies. How to respond? During the trip, you follow this plan while preemptively confirming and eliminating surprises. And so, with this plan, you gain control over the unknown and avoid unnecessary troubles. That's how checklists overcome errors of ineptitude in principle. Here, Gawande elaborates on his understanding of human error. In his view, errors of ineptitude are unforgivable. Two inherent human weaknesses make these errors inevitable. But checklists are the perfect antidote. They assist memory on critical steps, enforce rigorous planning and checking, and prove remarkably reliable. With checklist mechanics clarified, next let's explore how checklists function in practice. Gawande categorizes the world's problems into three types: simple problems, complicated problems, and extremely complex problems. Simple problems have clear solutions, like baking brownies. A recipe solves it completely. Complicated problems? Think of them as collections of simple problems. Each part has solutions, but the whole lacks direct answers. Complicated problems often involve specialized expertise, intricate divisions of labor, and numerous steps. Extremely complex problems have huge outcome uncertainties. As Gawande vividly explains, raising children, each child's uniqueness means experience may not guarantee success elsewhere. First, the 8.
For example, ICU staff face extremely complex problems. Pneumonia patients with identical bacteria, symptoms, and antibiotics still recover differently, requiring constant adaptation to the unexpected.
With these problem types defined, the corresponding checklist strategies become clear.
Gawande states, simple problems need execution checklists. Complicated ones require phase check checklists. Extremely complex ones demand communication checklists.
So what's an execution checklist?
Take baking. A detailed recipe guides step-by-step execution to perfection.
That recipe is your kitchen execution checklist. Phase check checklists verify earlier work execution, forcing confirmation of easily overlooked steps. They're like monthly, midterm, and final exams. Teachers review progress per subject, helping students identify gaps and fix them. At work, you can set similar phase tests for yourself. For highly complex work, split phase check checklists into separate subject lists. What exactly should they cover? How many items to list depends on your actual needs. In short, it must be highly targeted, focusing on easily overlooked items. Gawande knows investors who brought checklists into their work. One fund titan insists on using a day 3 checklist when analyzing companies. Gawande considers this an excellent phase check checklist. Before investing, this titan analyzes a decade's worth of financial statements for each company. To ensure no oversights in their analysis, the fund titan creates detailed check items, the day 3 checklist. When analysis reaches day 3, they use this checklist for verification. For example, one item requires carefully reading disclosed significant equity changes. This item exposed executives selling shares while touting company vision. Catching this hypocrisy allowed the Titan to back out, dodging disaster. In summary, phase check checklists verify execution completeness for specific stages or aspects. When handling complex work, you need this checklist type. Now let's examine communication checklists. Communication checklists mandate discussions on specific issues at set times. Inspiration came from Gawande's construction site visit. In the command center, he saw not just construction schedules, but a submission schedule chart. This checklist specified communication tasks, not construction tasks. The submission schedule listed times, topics, and participants. This checklist institutionalized communication, boosting coordination while enabling early risk detection and intervention.
Gawande shared a harrowing rescue case.
On arrival, the patient had a 5-centimeter abdominal knife wound, but stable vitals and was conscious.
Initial assessment deemed it non-critical, but during treatment, the patient deteriorated, heart racing, eyes rolling back, consciousness lost.
The moment doctors opened the patient's abdomen, blood gushed out. They discovered a wound over 30 centimeters deep that had pierced the aorta. Even for doctors accustomed to knife wounds, such an injury was extremely rare. In fact, the injury was caused by a bayonet. But during admission, no one asked about the weapon. Had medical staff known it was a bayonet wound, they'd never have treated it as minor. They would have anticipated internal damage and taken appropriate measures. That concludes the first question: how checklists overcome errors of ineptitude. By remembering critical steps and enforcing rigorous planning. For all three problem types, checklists offer tailored solutions. Now to our second question: crafting effective checklists. First, who creates them, and should everyone learn? Truth is, we're all checklist creators. Shopping lists, dinner menus, travel guides in daily life. Aren't these universal? Even junior employees need schedules to boost performance. Managers especially. Checklist creation is often core to their role. Thus, learning to create effective checklists is essential for all. Now let's formally explore how to craft them. This involves both micro and macro dimensions. Micro level, designing specific checklists. Macro level, building systems for complex work. We'll cover both. First, micro. Despite industry variations, effective checklists share three traits: precision, practicality, and continuous refinement. Starting with the first trait, precision. Precision means distilling the most essential points from complexity, the core logic of any effective checklist. The first step is identifying those critical items. The second step is summarizing items clearly and actionably. For example, when making a Thai chicken feet recipe, what's the crucial point? Definitely the distinct ingredients, specifically replacing pickled peppers with Thai chili sauce. Equally vital are ingredient quantities, main components, and corresponding pairings. Only then can authentic Thai flavors, sweet, sour, mildly spicy, be guaranteed. The challenge: our checklists are often more complex than recipes, making key points harder to capture. Gawande cites a public health improvement study. This project aimed to reduce child mortality in Karachi slums. Causes complex: poor infrastructure, low literacy, political instability. All hoped for top-down reform. But a young team member proposed distributing free soap while promoting 6 usage scenarios: babbing, pre-cooking meals, post-toilet, baby wiping, and pre-feeding others. Results later amazed. Despite unchanged conditions, soap use areas saw child diarrhea drop 52%, pneumonia 48%. Impetigo fell 35%. This checklist perfectly met precision requirements. First, it targeted the core. Unlike grand infrastructure proposals, SOAP had immediate impact. Second, simplicity. 6 clear scenarios made it understandable and implementable. Next, effective checklists' second trait, practicality. Consider emergency pilots. Their checklists should fit one page with clear large font formatting. Even in non-extreme cases, overly lengthy checklists frustrate users and risk abandonment. To boost practicality, Gawande reminds creators: keep checklists concise. In fact, a checklist that accurately targets key points can be extremely concise. Non-essentials must be ruthlessly cut. Additionally, checklist language should use familiar professional terminology with clear, effective formatting. The third checklist trait, continuous refinement through timely adjustments. To maintain effectiveness, checklists require ongoing improvement. They're rarely perfect immediately, but evolve through practical application. For example, Boeing publishes over 100 flight checklists annually, all either new or modified versions. Operating room safety checklists similarly evolve as frontline staff adjust them based on real-world issues. Simply put, checklists aren't planned. They evolve organically. To summarize micro-level checklist creation, effective checklists must precisely target essential points, remain practical or user-friendly even in extremes, and undergo continuous refinement. Now we'll explore macro-level checklist systems, scientifically structuring checklists for complex work. Complex work often requires multiple checklists, making correct checklist selection at critical junctures paramount.
This involves structuring the system, clarifying which tasks need checklists and when to activate them during workflow stages.
Ultimately, ensuring checklists are used at precisely the right moment is crucial. For instance, pediatric surgery antibiotic administration has a critical 60-minute window. Checking this effectively reduces post-op infection risk, but when should verification occur? Thus, pediatric checklists must include antibiotic verification with explicit timing, ensuring node accuracy. The book introduces three checklist architectures: point-based, linear, and trigger-based layouts. Note, these architectures can be used independently or nested together. In fact, sufficiently complex work usually requires combining multiple architectural techniques. First, point-based layout. When complex work splits into relatively independent subtasks, each gets its own checklist. Pilot's flight manuals are classic point-based layouts. Manuals may be 200 pages thick, but pilots don't read them cover to cover. Normal procedures fit in 2 to 3 pages. The rest are emergency checklists: landing gear failure, cabin fire, co-pilot incapacity, each independent. Pilots only use relevant checklists when specific situations arise. This demands point-based architecture. Building construction requires point-based layouts too. 16 plus trades, structural, electrical, finishes, each need specialized checklists. Second architecture, linear layout. Setting checklists according to workflow phases. Standard surgical safety checklists use linear layouts with 3 checkpoints: pre-anesthesia, pre-incision, and pre-departure, each verifying allergies, antibiotic use, anesthesia equipment, etc. That pediatric antibiotic check activated right before skin incision. Construction sites also need linear layouts.
Interior and exterior finishes can only start when structural work reaches specific stages.
Third architecture, trigger-based layouts, activating actions when specific conditions occur. Gawande shares rock star David Lee Roth's contract clause. Backstage must have M&Ms with 0 brown candies.
Failure means canceled show plus full compensation, not diva behavior.
This was Roth's safety trigger, verifying contract compliance.
Performance contracts have countless technical writers detailing installation specs.
The M&Ms clause existed solely to help Roth verify that organizers had carefully read all installation details. Finding a forbidden brown M&M meant organizers skipped contract details, triggering full equipment inspections. This method never failed. Every time Roth discovered issues like undersized stage doors blocking equipment passage. At least once, Roth canceled a show purely over brown M&Ms.
That time, they found inadequate stage load capacity, risking mid-performance collapse.
Fortunately, our macro-level checklist discussion concludes here. Robust scientific checklist systems ensure correct checklists activate at precise moments. Gawande introduced 3 architectures: point-based, linear, and trigger-based layouts. These can be used independently or nested together. This concludes part 2. Effective checklists require micro-level precision, practicality, and adaptability, and macro-level scientific structuring. Now to our third question, ensuring effective checklist implementation. You now understand checklist mechanics and creation, but true power requires implementation, actually using them. Gawande believes this final step is deceptively difficult. His checklist promotion struggles prove this. Even with proven benefits, resistance persists across fields. He once asked an investment friend, "How many around you use checklists?" The reply, "Hardly any." Gawande found the knowing-doing gap stems from two sources, individual and systemic. Individually, people feel checklists challenge their authority and stifle creativity. And additionally, complacency whispers, "Such basic mistakes won't happen to me." Systemically, lacking enforcement mechanisms leaves checklists gathering dust. Meanwhile, at the operational level, overemphasizing hierarchy reduces checklist execution to mere formality. For individual level issues, Gawande believes the only solution is mindset evolution, recognizing our limitations. Maintain humility before checklists. Among top-performing pilots, even veterans execute checklists meticulously like rookies during flights. Is this likely foundational to their excellence? Of course, individual unpredictability necessitates systemic enforcement for effective checklist execution. Gawande states this enforcement comes from two sources. First, top-down integration of checklists into essential management systems. Second, full decentralization at the implementation level. The latter is a core focus in Gawande's book. Decentralization means when teams execute checklists, should the highest-ranking expert lead? No. Gawande argues the ideal leader isn't that person, but other team members. In fact, Gawande initially believed lead surgeons should oversee this in operating rooms. After all, they typically possess the authority, but aviation experience changed his view. In aviation best practice, checklist initiation falls to whoever isn't directly piloting. First reason, captains might be too occupied with operations to conduct checks. Second, deeper reason, decentralization signals that flight safety is everyone's responsibility. All have authority to question operations. Adopting this, Gawande assigned circulating nurses to initiate surgical safety checks. If nurses haven't uncovered surgical instruments, lead surgeons cannot begin. At Johns Hopkins, nurses gained authority to halt surgeries for checklist deviations. Okay, the third question, how to ensure effective checklist implementation. So, to wrap up, it requires individuals to shift their mindset and truly believe in checklists' power. Meanwhile, managers must design effective systems, ensuring everyone takes responsibility for checklist efficacy. That concludes our interpretation of the checklist revolution. Atul Gawande elevates checklists to sacred duty. Concise, efficient lists with problem-specific strategies drastically reduce helplessness and frustration in complexity. In truth, a checklist isn't just paper. It's a powerful cognitive tool. With checklists, you maintain graceful competence even when situations overwhelm personal capacity. All right, that's our take on the checklist revolution. Find reading notes below the audio. Until next time.